how a lapse in appropriations, a shutdown works. Keep in mind, the technical term, the legal term, is actually a lapse in appropriation. So when you saw the notices go out today, they reference a lapse. That is the formal name for the shutdown. Early this morning, federal workers got notices from their various agencies as to whether they were exempt or furloughed employees. They sort of fell into three categories. Either you were exempt and you were to come to work either today or Monday, depending on your ordinary work schedule. You were absolutely furloughed, in which case you were not to come to work beginning today and going over into Monday. Or there's actually another group of people that would show up for a few hours on Monday or today, up to 4 hours, in order to close down shop or prepare for the lapse. So those notices went out today.
Yesterday, I talked to the president in the morning. We were not far apart on the issues. A deal to fund military and critical programs for the middle class can be struck. We agreed to the contours of that deal. An immigration deal was reached. We could address children's health insurance, other health issues, disaster aid. We went to the meeting and had a long and productive discussion. I told the president we Democrats were willing to fund the military at the highest levels in history, far above even his budget request. I reluctantly put his wall request for the southern border on the table. It was his request. We left the meeting having agreed to try for a short-term CR that would keep everyone at the negotiating table for a few more days. The president suggested, let's do it by Tuesday night. We said, great. Several hours later, he called back. He said, so I hear we have a 3-week deal. I said, no, Mr. President, no one's even talked to me about a 3-week deal. I heard that's the deal. I said, no one's talked to me. I called Leader Pelosi. No one had talked to her. Then, a few hours later, they called back again. Well, we're going to need this in addition. Things, it was General Kelly, that they knew were far, far right and off the table. Now, the lunch that seemed so promising was quickly overtaken by hard right forces in the administration, even though we bent over backwards to meet the president's demands. Negotiating with this White House is like negotiating with Jell-O. It's next to impossible. As soon as you take one step forward, the hard right forces the president 3 steps back. Now, I want to say, I don't have the personal animus that a lot of my colleagues have towards the president. We're both blunt and direct. I agree with him vehemently on just about every issue, but at least we can talk to one another. But it's next to impossible to strike a deal with the president because he can't stick to the terms. I have found this out. Leader McConnell has found this out. Speaker Ryan has found this out. So here we are on the first anniversary of the president's inauguration, mired in the Trump shutdown. This was not I'm not going to get into the specific numbers, but I will tell you it was the president who suggested the number, and I said, let's put it on the table.
My favorite is still the Schumer shutdown. So it's got that nice little ring to it, doesn't it? So, yes, sir.
Speaking of Senator Schumer, he says he left the meeting yesterday with the president thinking he had arrived at the broad outlines of a deal, and that something happened that the president changed his mind. Senator Schumer says that he relented under pressure from the far right. What's your account of that meeting? I know you weren't in the room, but what's the White House account of that meeting?
Yeah, I was in that meeting, but I did talk to the chief about it this morning, and I'll give you an example of how Mr. Schumer is mischaracterizing the discussions. One of the things that, according to the chief, that Mr. Schumer told the president was that, I will give you all of the money that you want for your wall. And the president said, oh, that's great. I need $20 billion to build a whole wall. And Mr. Schumer said, oh, no, only 1.6. That's all you asked for last year in the 2018 budget, which I happened to write, okay? We had a $1.6 billion request in the 2018 budget that we'd like to see in the 2018 appropriations bill, okay? That is not all of the money for the wall, nor was it ever intended to be all the money for the wall. But Chuck Schumer actually had the gall to look at the president and said, I'm giving you everything you asked for the wall, and then when pressed, admitted that he wasn't doing it. That's the type of negotiation that Mr. Schumer has been engaged in with the president. You have to ask yourself at one point, does it even become profitable to continue to work with somebody like that? So Mr. Schumer is going to have to up his game a little bit and be a little bit more honest with the President of the United States if we're going to see progress on that front. Yes, ma'am.
One question for you, but two quick ones before that. How
Yeah.
long will this shutdown last?
You have to ask Congress. Again, the Democrats in the Senate could end this shutdown today.
What are you planning for? Days, weeks?
No, we plan mostly a day at a time. You've sort of looked, there's different sort of things on the horizon that come up. For example, we have a pay period on Friday that would be one sort of goalpost. But we'll manage this day by day. The funds that I've mentioned, some agencies are sitting on quite a bit of carry forward funds. They could go out longer without being impacted. Some have none, so they'd be impacted immediately. So there's no real individual answer to that.
The Republicans control the presidency, the Senate, the House. They know who's responsible. The American people know that the Republicans control the presidency, the Senate, and the House, and they know who's responsible. America knows this is the Trump shutdown. Only the president can end it. We Democrats are at the table. We're ready to negotiate. The president needs to pull up a chair to end this shutdown.
To each of the committee members, today is Saturday, January the 20th, I believe, and we are back at the Rules Committee with the sole purpose of making sure that Congress can move back to the floor with authorization. We were expected to be back for home recess, where we would go back and meet and work with our constituents and listen to their needs and be prepared. We find ourselves in Washington as a result of a shutdown that happened at midnight.
In the first place, it's not that we shut down the House. The voters last night in the Senate did that. I recognize that you got 5 Democrat votes, but I believe we got 5 Republican votes. So it was a bipartisan vote. Chuck Schumer did not do that. As I've said here a couple days ago, and couldn't be even stronger today, our fingerprints were not on that CR. We had no idea until we were ready to come to rules what you even had written down. And no, it is not good. We are not happy with what you did to the health care bill, not a bit. We made it perfectly clear, our leader did, in every conversation she had, what you needed to get our votes. But it simply didn't matter until we got to the floor. And then all of a sudden, all we heard was, please do something here, and this chip, which we made very plain as well. Chip was critically important to us, but we wanted a longer term or a maybe permanent chip, similar to what you did for corporate tax cuts. We thought that the health of the children of the United States was as important as that. And as far as, I must take umbrage with my colleague Polis if he thinks that they were all working together. I heard Senator McConnell, myself, with my very own ears, say if only he knew what the president wanted, he'd do it. And it's been almost difficult to impossible, I would think. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it in my life. That the things the president said, we all heard him say, "Show me something, I'll take the heat and I'll sign it." Well, hardly. Dick Durbin was at our caucus again this morning, and nobody doubted it, but he reinforced what he had said about the conversation that he had with the president. We don't know where he is. We have a feeling he would like to get to Mar-a-Lago and do his $100,000 dinner tonight, and he may go, for all I know. But what I would certainly plead with you, it's not the matter of timing, how many days it is, it's what's in it.
This continuing resolution, which the House passed, funded all of the priorities that we passed in a collaborative way last year. This continuing resolution that the House passed prevented the Cadillac tax from going into effect on workers that we both have in our districts. And we're all pleased that we're not putting families under that new burden. This continuing resolution that passed solved the children's health insurance program that many of our Democratic governors are facing and our Republican governors are facing. Even though the original extension was for 5 years, this was a 6-year extension to the program that we all wanted. This was the measure that came out, Mr. Chairman, to bring people together.
Now, I don't have great respect for Donald John Trump, largely because of his actions, not because of anything that he has in his mind about what is good for this country. I don't think he knows what it is to legislate. I don't think he knows what it is that we do when we legislate. I don't think his meetings with Schumer or with Nancy Pelosi or with McConnell or with Cornyn, when they leave out of those meetings, I think that they can look at him and clearly understand that he didn't know one thing about what was going on other than simplistic conclusions about his ideas about how the government ought to run. He may very well have his base. Any one of us has our base. But a base is not what America is. America is an idea with ideals and values that do not exclude people, but that include people. So what you've done, my friends, is you've twisted yourself in a knot by simply excluding the people that could help us do this together. The simple fact of the matter is we had the most closed rules in the history of the Rules Committee, which means that people were shut out before the shutdown.
Democrats worked tirelessly to avoid this shutdown. Not a single Democrat wanted to see critical federal programs shuttered, their doors, or put our economy at risk. This is not how we ran government when Democrats were in charge. But Republicans struggled in September to keep government doors open. They struggled in December. And yesterday, they failed. They failed the American people. This Trump shutdown certainly could have been avoided. If at any turn, Speaker Ryan or Leader McConnell would have shown just an ounce of leadership, a bit of courage, none of this would have happened today. We wouldn't be here today. If instead of enabling and being complicit in this Trump shutdown by our Republican colleagues, government would be open today. If they had shown half the effort that they did in passing their tax bill, a quarter of the effort in passing a tax bill for the wealthiest 1% in this country and the richest multinational corporations in the history of the world, government would be open today. But Republicans and President Trump have shown they lack the leadership skills, that they have no courage, and probably more importantly, they lack the empathy with struggling Americans today. And that alone is the reason we are shut down, and the middle class and middle-class Americans and working families are being put at risk. This is the penalty that we pay for the Trump shutdown. And with that, I now turn to the ranking member of the Budget Committee, our good friend John Yarmuth.
Thank you, Joe. We are at this point for one reason and one reason only, and that's the incompetence of the leadership of the Republican majority in the House and Senate and the incompetence of the leadership in the White House. If you think back to not just through this year, but even last year, we never had an operating budget for the first 7 months of the fiscal year. We finally got one for 5 months. So far this year, not only have we gone through 4 continuing resolutions, we didn't get a budget resolution at all until July, which was several months past when it is normally put forward.
Well, here we are, Mr. President. This is day 2 of the Senate Democrats' government shutdown. Day 2 since the Democratic leader made the political calculation to do something that, according to a recent survey, even most Democrats don't support. He shut down the government to appease a portion of his party's left-wing base. Makes you shake your head. Who comes up with ideas like this? Well, on Friday, a bipartisan group of senators voted to advance a bill that would have kept the federal government open, provided 6 years of certainty for the state children's health insurance program, which at least 7 Democratic governors have written are in dire straits, allowed ongoing talks to continue on a variety of other important issues that we've been discussing here for a couple of months. Together, Democrats and Republicans had enough votes to pass it. 5 Democrats crossed over and voted against shutting down the government, to keep the government open while we do our work. The House had already passed it. The President was ready to sign it. We were poised to send him this compromise solution and erase the threat of a shutdown. But unfortunately, my friend, the Democratic leader, had other ideas.
Nobody wants a government shutdown. Senator Nelson provided the opportunity for us to avoid this. And then Senator Tester said, okay, maybe 1 day is too short. Maybe we can't get this done in 20. My view was we should have 12-hour CRs. We should have absolute burning pressure on ourselves. It should be physically miserable. We should be here. We should be working. We should be negotiating. That's my view. I think we should be on 12-hour CRs. I don't think people who even, listen, I can't go home, right? I live pretty far away. But even those who live on the Eastern Seaboard, I don't think anybody should be comfortable this weekend. Politically, physically, mentally, to understand what's happening to the country, you should not be comfortable. You should be embarrassed. And so I think we should be on 12-hour CRs. Okay, 24-hour CR, I was fine with that. That got rejected. How about a 3-day CR? Which was, by the way, what President Trump wanted to do, to try to close a deal. But those were rejected. And no one can explain to the public why we can't keep the government open for a few days to negotiate without punishing the whole country. Nobody wins during a shutdown.
Mr. President, when Donald Trump was a private citizen during the last government shutdown, he said, and I quote, "Problems start from the top, and they have to get solved from the top. And the president's the leader, and he's got to get everybody in a room, and he's got to lead." That's what Donald Trump said when he was Citizen Trump. He's now the president. Now that he's the president, he has those shoes to wear. He refuses to step into them and step up. The only person who actually said maybe we need a good shutdown is President Trump. Although I have to say recently, the Office of Management and Budget Director Mick Mulvaney also said it was cool to shut down the government. Unbelievable. Definitely not cool. This attitude may explain why the president keeps shooting down bipartisan efforts to prevent a shutdown. Republicans control the House and the Senate. I don't know why we have to keep reminding Republicans that they control the House and the Senate. There is no reason for the majority leader and the speaker to enable this Trump shutdown to continue. There is no reason to wait on the president to tell them to do whatever or tell them what he believes, because Donald Trump is a changeling. He is incapable of being consistent. I witnessed this 2 weeks ago when I went to the White House with a bipartisan group of members of Congress to find a path forward to protect the Dreamers. During the meeting, in front of all of us and on national TV for over 50 minutes, Donald Trump promised to sign whatever bipartisan compromise that Congress came up with. He said he'd take the heat. We had barely driven back to the Capitol before he went back on that promise. This pattern repeated on Friday when the Democratic leader discussed a broad bipartisan compromise with the president to keep the government open. And after agreeing to, or appearing to agree on a framework, the president shortly thereafter said no, once again. This is Donald Trump's shutdown. It's important to understand who is responsible for his shutdown. He himself said it's the president who's supposed to be bringing everybody together. But frankly, it's more important to end the shutdown. It's time for Congress to lead. Congress is a separate branch of government, and we should start acting like it. We can come to a broad bipartisan agreement on nearly every part of a deal to end the shutdown. We can reauthorize the Children's Health Insurance Program that provides health insurance to 9 million children all across the country. We can fund community health centers that provide health care for hundreds, literally hundreds of millions of people in our communities. We can protect the dreamers. We can fully fund the Department of Defense and provide funding parity for critical domestic programs. Congress shouldn't wait around for the president to make up his mind. Let's do our jobs. I support passing a very short-term funding bill somewhere between 1 and 3 days, which we have proposed, to sustain the urgency in getting this done in as short a time as possible. So a multi-week extension of government funding that allows the president, the majority leader, and the speaker to kick the can down the road and pit one group against another is not the way to go. The Republicans continue to pit the Children's Health Insurance Program against dreamers. They pit funding for troops against dreamers, pitting one group after another, on and on. Are the Republicans saying we can only take care of one group or the other? Do we cut off the right arm or the left arm? We've seen this pitting one group against another strategy at work all week. Authorization for the Children's Health Insurance Program expired September 30th, months ago. But the majority leader waited until now to put it up for a vote because he hoped to use it as leverage to divide Democrats and leave dreamers out in the cold, pitting one group against another. And just as a reminder, guess who spent months and months trying to take away health care from millions of Americans and more months to provide the richest 1% of people and corporations in our country huge tax cuts, all behind closed doors? The Republicans, that's who. We could have and should have funded the Children's Health Insurance Program months ago. We could have come to a compromise on dreamers months ago. The majority leader has come to the floor repeatedly to argue there is no urgency to protect the dreamers or the DACA participants, that we have months to find a solution. Doesn't he know that more than 16,000 people have lost their DACA protections since Donald Trump cruelly and cynically ended the program in September? And every single day, 122 DACA recipients lose their status. These young lives are on hold. They are scared. They are afraid of being kicked out of the only country that they know and love. That is the United States of America.
Now, we all know in the Senate, the minority has the power to filibuster. I support that right from an institutional point of view, but the question is, when do you use it? On Friday, the Democratic leader made the extraordinary and destructive choice to filibuster our bipartisan bill and guarantee the American people a shutdown of their federal government. Now, it's the second day of the Senate Democrat filibuster and the Senate Democrat shutdown of the federal government. Because the president wouldn't resolve months of ongoing negotiations over massive issues in one brief meeting and give the Democratic leader everything he wants, my friend across the aisle has shut down the government for hundreds of millions of Americans because he didn't get everything he wanted in one meeting Friday with the president. So who pays the price for that? Health care for needy children, training and resources for our men and women in uniform, care for our veterans who came home, and survivor benefits for families of heroes who did not. Full funding for the CDC, for the NIH, and for routine safety inspections of food and medicine.
Senator from Hawaii has the floor.
So I thought I heard the senator from North Carolina suggest that we stay in and get this done tonight. I think we still have a chance to get this done before 1 a.m.
I do.
And I still have the floor. And if we don't get this done by 1 a.m., I personally don't think we should adjourn. I think this should be personally uncomfortable. I think this should be physically uncomfortable. I think we should be embarrassed by this. And I think you make a very good point. We should stay in until we get it done. And so it is disappointing to me that I hear all of that. And yet when I ask you whether you'd be willing to work on a unanimous consent request to effectuate what you just said, the answer was no.
So here's the situation. If nothing changes, the cloture vote will be no sooner than 1 a.m. tonight. We could resolve this much earlier if the Democratic leader withdraws his procedural objection and allows the Senate to proceed to a vote. Our constituents want us to end this. Secretary Mattis, our military leaders, and our governors want us to end this, and we can. Today is the right day to do it. Senate Democrats only need to withdraw their filibuster and allow a bipartisan majority to move America forward. If they really care about the big issues, increased defense funding, disaster relief, DACA, and border security, and other important matters that we've been negotiating, and that I would like to bring to the floor, then they will stop their filibuster and this shutdown and let the negotiators get back to work. Everyone has figured this out. This shutdown was a political miscalculation of gargantuan proportions. But it doesn't need to go on any longer. It could stop today. So let's step back from the brink. Let's stop victimizing the American people and get back to work on their behalf.
This is a pivotal moment for Congress. Are we going to continue to bend to the whims of an unpredictable, mercurial, and unreliable president? Or will we come together on a bipartisan basis, behave like the separate branch of government that we are, and reauthorize the Children's Health Insurance Program, fund community health centers, protect dreamers, and provide parity for defense and domestic programs in a long-term budget deal? I respect my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. What I don't respect is holding up this process, knowing full well that we can come up with a bipartisan way in 2 days, even 1 day, to end this shutdown. Mr. President, I yield the floor.